Lord, I want to give special consideration tonight for all the people that were victims of the tornado. Lord, I pray you be with them, give them peace and comfort, especially those who lost loved ones or just missing homes, and there's just such devastation over their Father. Just pray you be with them and take care of them in every way, Lord. And we just pray that tonight everybody here would be here with open hearts, and that we would be able to do a great job for our county that we love so much. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Burdett prayed for those victims of the storm, and I know our fire department, I don't know if Clint's in here or not.
Yeah, he was.
Oh, there he is. I know y'all worked diligently. I saw that in Richmond Hill. Maybe during staff reports, you might give us a little update of how we were able to help and minister to a neighboring community. We have our agenda before us tonight. I understand there's a couple of corrections to the agenda. I'll let our clerk state those, and I entertain a motion to approve as she states it.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the changes tonight are to remove old business number 1, which is consideration to approve a railroad crossing closure at DeWitt Road. This item was postponed from the March 15th meeting. It is being removed from the agenda. Additionally, we are requesting to remove new business number 18, consideration to approve to award a contract for the 2021 full depth reclamation with asphalt emulsion road resurfacing projects. These are your changes, sir.
Can I explain to a couple of folks here about the DeWitt Road item? As I told y'all before the meeting, we did get written correspondence from Norfolk Southern that they would not require the closing of the DeWitt Road crossing, so that is just a moot point. Now, in 5-6 years, they could come back and request it again, but at this time, they're not requiring that. So it goes away.
This goes away.
Yeah. So.
And I appreciate
That's good.
the commissioner doing the due diligence and working with the railroad to make that happen for his constituents. That's very, very, very commendable.
Thank you.
So we have our agenda. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion, Mr. Loach, second, Mr. Kiefer, to approve the agenda as presented with the 2 corrections from our clerk. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Hearing none, we have our agenda. We have the minutes that you've read, and are there any corrections or additions to those minutes from our previous meeting? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Deloach, second by Mr. Burdett to approve the minutes as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no.
I was not here, so I'm not voting there.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'll note that Mr. Loper has abstained.
Sorry, who was the second?
Mr. Burdett.
Burdett.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Burdett. And we'll note this is the minutes for, what's the date of that? It's on the agenda. Just
Sorry, it's April 5th.
April 5th. So we'll make sure we know that is the April 5th minutes that we just approved, 2022. Okay, welcome our public tonight here to participate in this meeting. Ask you to speak to any item you'd like to speak to that's on the agenda as it comes up. If you wish to speak to the item, state your name when you come to the microphone very clearly so the clerk has a record of that before you speak. All the correspondence for this meeting, the documents are in the clerk's office or on our website, and we'll have some presentations tonight, I'm sure, during it, so hopefully you have the information you need to speak clearly and wisely to the items. And with that, we're going to move into our consent agenda, and there are 5 items on our consent agenda. I always read those, and then we'll entertain a motion for all 5 at one time. Item number 1 on the consent agenda is consideration to renew an MOU between the Sexual Assault Response Team and the Effingham County Correctional Institution for forensic examination services. Item number 2 is consideration to approve a new lease agreement with FP Mailing Services to allow for new meters at multiple locations. Item number 3, consideration to approve, to ratify, and affirm acceptance of a grant award from Georgia Public Library Service for the Major Repairs and Renovation Grant. Item 4, consideration to approve to submit a grant application to Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation. And 5 on the consent agenda is consideration to approve quote number Q-57678 from ESO for additional software for EMS. The motion to approve the consent agenda?
Make a motion to approve as read.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Loper, second by Mr. Burdette to approve the consent agenda as read. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Item number 1 under new business is presentation of the fiscal year 2021 audit financial statements by Lanier, Dale, and Proctor.
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Barnes, the Finance Director. The auditors are here to give a rundown of the audited statements for fiscal year 2021. But before they do, Finance usually gives a few highlights, so I prepared a couple of slides with some key takeaways from the financial statements. So just briefly, these are the items I'm going to be going over, income statement items, highlights, and then a summary of the audit results. So these, on this first slide, these are the normal operating revenues for our major funds. These numbers come from the Statement of Revenues and Expenses, which in the audit is on page 18 for the governmental funds and page 25 for the enterprise funds and the self-funded insurance. You'll note that there are 3 new funds this year in fiscal year 21. We have the T-SPLOS Fund, the American Rescue Plan Act Fund, and the self-funded insurance. We are required to account for these items in their own funds. We see that overall, the revenues in both governmental and enterprise funds are up for the year, and there are a few key items in there I do want to go over. In the special tax district, the home insurance premium tax of about $2.8 million went straight into the fire fund this year, rather than being first recorded in special tax district and then transferred to the fire fund. And so this was a large part of why the special tax district operating revenues were down, while the other governmental funds, which includes the fire fund, were up for the year. The ARPA fund, you'll see there, most of the $6.2 million that the county received was classified as unearned revenue in fiscal year 21. So that's going to be earned in future years as those funds are expended. In the SPLOS fund, SPLOS tax receipts themselves were up significantly, about $1.8 million. But the SPLOS fund's overall revenues declined because in fiscal year 20, we had more LMIG funds from GDOT, including those from
Mark,
Fort
is
Howard
this in the
Roundabout.
MDA portion of the audit?
No, sir.
Where's it at? Is it
It's just a slide
a
presentation.
slide? Okay, you don't, it's not part of the audit, okay.
No, she's gonna do, the auditor's gonna make that presentation.
Yeah, if it was something in our audit, we wanted to go ahead and go to it, but that's okay, keep
Oh,
going.
okay. So in fiscal year 2020, the SPLOS fund had more LMIG funds, including the Fort Howard Roundabout. And fiscal year 2020 also had some significant reimbursements from GDOT for the Parkway. And so the SPLOS proceeds themselves were up significantly in fiscal year 2021.
Have we spent all the SPLOS proceeds from the previous SPLOS?
No, sir.
I didn't see in the audit, maybe you can address that for me later. I didn't see a different schedule. I thought we needed a schedule for each SPLOS.
Well, the 2012 one is done. The 2017 one, we still have funds for that, yes.
And we just approved,
A new one's going to start July 1, yes.
new one doesn't start to July 1, so we only have one in place now.
Right.
Gotcha, that's, okay,
Okay.
good.
So in the T-SPLOS fund, the bond proceeds that we received in fiscal year 21, they're not categorized as operating revenues. So the 1.9 million you see in there was the T-SPLOS tax proceeds alone, which that year started in the latter part of the fiscal year. And then down in the other non-major funds, which are listed at the bottom of the enterprise funds, those were unusually high in fiscal year 20, because in that year we closed out some old items related to the Water and Sewer Impact Fees Fund. So 2020 had some one-shot items that we don't see in 2021 and won't see in future years. Typically, that other non-major funds is just the dry waste collection site, which has only tipping fees, which are now contracted to Atlantic. And then down there at the very bottom was kind of a new category fund this year, and that's the new partially self-funded insurance. And the revenues in there represent the premiums charged to other departments for the major medical insurance.
Can I ask a quick question? Why is the wastewater treatment plant broken out separate from the water and sewer? Because the plant is part of our sewer, and the plant's never gonna, I'm assuming that 116,000 is those who come to the plant and dump at the,
That's right.
right. And so we don't want to be led astray, and not that we would be, but if you look at water and sewer and you say we're about at break even, well, not really, because we still haven't covered the cost of our treatment facility,
Exactly.
which is part of our sewer. I really feel like that ought to be included. If you're gonna do anything, have a
Combine them
water
into one.
operation and have a sewer operation. Because
Right.
we do have different fees for water and sewer, and have the total cost of the sewer and the total cost of the water. I'm not sure we shouldn't restructure that, because when we're looking at rates as a board, we wanna know if we're covering our cost.
Right.
Particularly as we expand the county, we have the ability to cover our costs through, billing services. And right now. we
And
wouldn't know.
that is actually one of the changes that, that Mark and I have discussed for this upcoming budget year,
Yes.
is
Okay, good.
to combine those two funds. We're not quite sure why they were separated, a while back, but it doesn't make much sense. They are components of the same entity. So we'll be, looking at presenting that as a combined fund for next year's budget.
And you might even consider having a water fund and a sewer fund, just the thought, because most of those can be broke out. The fixtures are separate, some of the personnel may be the same, but you just divide that 50-50 or
Right.
60-40, where they spend most of the time. Because that way we can set rates for the sewer and the water and know what we are actually losing on the sewer, which is usually a loser. and usually make money on the water. It'd be
Right.
easier for me to get my mind around the revenue stream that we need.
Yes, sir, we can combine those into one fund and have two departments in that fund to keep those.
That's the way I'd like to see it.
Right.
Okay, great.
Have we received all of our funds from GDOT on Effingham Parkway, or?
No, not totally. So we still have some more reimbursements we're about to send out to get some more.
Okay.
And then after this last batch, I believe that's gonna max out the total per the PFA.
So the older stuff, that's all,
Mhm.
we're good there, okay.
Okay, and this is just a graphical representation of the governmental fund revenues year over year. And you can see there's a significant increase in the general fund especially. So on this slide, we have the operating expenses, which again, these are found on pages 18 and 25 of the annual financial report. We see an overall increase from the prior year. One of the largest changes in fiscal year 21 is that $3.8 million expense in the new T-SPLOST fund. And this is the city's portion of the T-SPLOST bond proceeds. And it's a pretty significant part of the year-over-year increase that we see in the governmental fund section. Down in the enterprise fund section, we saw rising costs driven in part by an increased customer base. More homes means more water purchased from the city of Savannah and more trash bin pickups paid for from the sanitation fund. So the growth of the county did fuel some of those increased expenses down there. And then here we have a chart, and we can see these are the expenses year over year, and you see the not quite as big a gap as you saw in the revenues year over year. So on this slide, we see the net effect of the operating revenues and the operating expenses that we were just looking at, plus the effect of non-operating items such as interfund transfers, the bond proceeds, and the Grandview land sale, which are not normal operating items. Like before, this information is also found on page 18 and 25 of the annual report, and a detailed breakdown of these fund balances and any restrictions they have can be found on the balance sheets on page 16 for governmental funds and page 24 for enterprise funds. The general fund we're going to cover in the next slide by itself a little bit. So going down in the T-SPLOST fund, the $35 million bond proceeds are the biggest bulk of that fund balance right there. In the enterprise funds, even though the wastewater treatment plant fund had an operating loss, we see the fund balance overall increased due to the annual budgeted operating transfer from the special tax district fund and for the non-operating capital cost recovery fees. And down at the very bottom, we see the partially self-funded insurance in its first year of operation did have more revenues than expenses at the end of the year. And then a little bit more specifically on the general fund balance, it did increase substantially in fiscal year 21 by about $15 million. The largest single cost for this was the Grandview sale, which is reported in the other financing sources section of the page 18 statement of revenues and expenses. It's important to note that about 14 million of that total fund balance will go to GDOT for the Parkway in fiscal year 22. This fund balance increase was also caused by other revenues exceeding expectations for the year. Local option sales tax, the vehicle title ad valorem tax, and real estate recording fees, just to name a few. Additionally, there were some expenses that came in below budget that also led to the increase in fund balance. One of the largest categories in the general fund were the personnel expenses, especially in public safety, like the prison and law enforcement. And that was caused in part by vacant positions staying open longer, which is just kind of a common issue nationwide after the pandemic. And the budgeted contingency that year was not needed and was not used.
Mark, the TAVT, how much of that do we retain as a percentage? We don't get 100% of that, do we? We get a portion?
I'd have to talk with the tax commissioner and find out exactly what that is. It flows from the state, the Department of Revenue, I believe, gives it to the tax commissioner and they disperse it to us.
This is curious because with the supply chain issues we've had and the car sales are supposedly down, that's exceeding expectations.
Yeah, when we started fiscal year 21, you know, we originally had a really low budget because we were expecting things like that to be low. And then halfway through the year, yeah,
Another
we
thing
bumped it back up.
Was curious about is our self-insurance scenario. Somebody did any kind of cost analysis or comparative analysis as to when we weren't self-insured to see if we're saving money, if we're gaining per person, per, you know, I don't know how you'd look at that to be fair, because I know we've grown as a county as well and staff as well, but.
Yeah, and we can, we do that. It's a little bit tricky to do it on the financial statement, only because when we do, the plan year is a calendar plan year, for the medical plan, and of course, we're a fiscal year, so every year you're seeing half of one plan year and the other half of another. But we can have HR do a presentation on how we stood year over year, and they can also say this is what you would have done if you were
Under a current scenario.
if you were under a standard premium policy.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Now, I will say we definitely had a rough first year in some of the large medical expenditures, and a lot of that was related to COVID hospitalizations and so on and so forth. But we budgeted for the worst on that, which is why we came out ahead. And so we're hoping to have a much better year next year, and so on and so forth. So.
Thank you.
Okay, on this slide, we have the investment earnings. We usually talk about those specifically each year. Virtually all the county's investment earnings come from the local government investment pool, which is managed by the state of Georgia. And here we see some pretty drastic decline in the LGIP earnings, and this was driven in part by just the overall economic conditions since the pandemic. And this has largely continued into fiscal year 22.
And that's just the earnings on the investment,
Right,
because they just not get anything anymore, yeah.
exactly.
That's- yeah.
So just some quick highlights. For this year, T-SPLOS began late in the year, and the county received the $35 million in bond proceeds. The partially self-funded major medical insurance started January 1. The Grandview tract was sold. That was a pretty major impact. The American Rescue Plan Act and $6.2 million in funding was received right near the end of the fiscal year. The enterprise vehicle fleet management began, and the construction of the CEM gym was completed, and progress did continue on in the Parkway. For the audit results, Lanier, Deal & Proctor issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements on page 3 of the annual report. Because of the amount of federal funds we received, including CARES Act funds, the auditors did carry out additional procedures on federal awards and issued an unmodified opinion on our compliance with award requirements on page 79. There were 3 findings in the financial statements. All of them were pertaining to constitutional officers' custodial funds, and the nature of those findings and the elected officials' responses are on page 82 of the annual report. And with that, that's all the highlights that finance is going to cover, so I'll turn it over to Kay Proctor, CPA, partner with Lanier, Deal & Proctor.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, so you guys always make my job pretty easy and go through all the financial highlights. I'll talk about a few things briefly, especially in the government-wide financial statements, but Mark has hit a lot of detail. Just kind of will thumb through the financial statements and I'll point out a few things. But we do appreciate the opportunity to work with you guys again. As Mark said, we did have an unmodified opinion on all opinion units within the county's audited financial statements. I would encourage you, in addition to what Mark has gone over, to look over the management discussion and analysis that starts on page 5 as well. That's a good general overview of this big, long financial statement that Mark's put together with some highlights and the county's finance staff. Okay, if you'll look at page 14, I like to briefly talk about the government-wide financial statements when I come and do an audit presentation, because these are the only financial statements you'll see for the government that are done on a full accrual basis, just like you would see in a business. So these include your capital assets, and they also include your long-term debt. When you look at the fund level financial statements, and when you talk about fund balance, those things are not taken into consideration. So I'm only going to talk about the primary government. So if you look, that'll be towards the middle of the page. You'll see the third column says total. That's the total of your governmental activities and your business type activities. If you'll look, you'll see that you have in assets a total of $246 million. Of that, it's just about split 50-50 between current and long-term, $118,000 approximately in current assets, and $128 million in capital assets. That's going to be your land, your equipment and machinery, vehicles, and that's going to be net of depreciation. So when you come down, you'll also see your liabilities. So your liabilities, the total is $43,366,000. Of that, you've got current liabilities for accounts payable, payroll type items, current amortizations on debt of $17.1 million. And then your total long-term liabilities, that's going to be primarily bonds payable, also some notes payable and some compensated absences, things like that. You're going to see $26,244,000. I'm sorry, I skipped over a line. Your total liabilities are $85 million. I apologize for that. I skipped over into the hospital authority. Of your $85 million in total total liabilities, you've got $27 million in current, and then $58 million approximately in long-term notes payable, bonds payable, things like that. So coming down, you have what you have what you owe, and then you have what you really have, which is, if you look at your net position, $160,724,000. And of that, you've got 99, almost 100 million invested in capital assets. That number is going to be your capital assets net of any related debt on those assets. You've got amounts restricted for capital projects. Those are going to be things like your SPLOST funds, service delivery to unincorporated areas. That's going to be your special tax district. Then you've got just a small amount of debt service fund and other purposes. This is going to be all of your other smaller special revenue funds, things like that. And so you have unrestricted $30,097,000 of that. So looking over at the next page, page 15.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
How are we going to allocate with the enterprise program? Will that be converted to the P&L or still be allocated on the balance sheet? Because I know now we're leasing, but what type of lease is that, and how will we allocate for that?
Well, those assets that are in this year, do you want to address those? As I know the ones that were in this year were operating type leases, and they'll change in this coming year.
Right, and that's going to be affected by the new GASB 87 rules, which go into effect in fiscal year '22. And so we're still calculating how that's going to look on the balance sheet, because this is the first year that that accounting standard is in effect, and it's completely changed how, capital financing leases versus operating leases and how they're presented. So we're going to know that here in the next few months as we compile all that data.
So we won't really know how to categorize that until it rolls out.
Right, yes, sir.
Now, I feel like you'll see it on what funds are most of those in?
Most of those are in the general fund. Yeah.
Most of those are in the general fund, and I feel like for the most part it'll be, debt proceeds in on the fund level, and then you'll see it as a liability, as a reconciling item on the government-wide.
Thank you.
Okay, so looking at page 15 is your statement of activities. I'm just going to point out a few things on here. This is one of these this is a very weird statement to me because you have to read it from the left and down, where normally you would read a profit and loss from the top to the bottom. You have total, if you look towards the middle of the page, total primary government expenses, $68,447,000. You net out your fines, fees, and charges for services of $22 million approximately. You had approximately $4 million in operating grants and contributions, $2.8 million in capital grants and contributions, and that's going to leave a net expense to be covered by your general revenues of the county, such as property taxes of approximately $40 million. You'll see your total general revenues are primarily property taxes, also sales tax. Next biggest item is the insurance premium tax. So you'll see your total general revenues are $55 million. After transfers, then you'll see your total general revenues and transfers, $55,161,000. You'll come down to a total increase in net position of $15,436,000, and that's an increase of approximately 11% from the prior year. I did want to point out, if you look at the net position for the end of the year, the $161 million. When we looked at that earlier, $30,097,000 of that net position was unrestricted. If you look back to your expense column, that first column to the left-hand side, you'll see your total primary government expenditures for the entire year were $68,447,000 as a whole. So if you look at your unrestricted net position going into this year as a percentage of your total government-wide accrual basis expenses for the entire year, that unrestricted fund balance would cover approximately 44% of that. So that's a strong accrual basis financial position.
Yeah, of that 30 million, we've got some 9 million restricted by the board for certain things. I think if you look at the balance sheet.
That's right, that's right.
And just so people will know that the 21 million that's unrestricted that we have, that's so high largely because of two major, the land sale and the federal monies that came in. They were about, what, 13,000 together. Of the 15,000 increase that moved that up to the 21 in unrestricted.
The federal monies, meaning the ARPA funds?
Yes.
Now, those are actually reported as a liability. That is one thing. I did want to point out where the three new funds were, so those did
As a
not.
restriction?
No, those are actually required by GASB to be recorded as unearned revenue. So
Okay.
if you'll look at the
Unearned
balance sheet,
Might be talking about the CARES Act funds potentially, because we did have
that's right.
2.8 million worth of that. I
In
think
CARES
There was some
money.
other funds that came in that's for the general
That's right.
fund, okay.
That's right.
And we had some other improvements there too.
So if you look at page 16, you'll see your modified accrual basis, which is almost a cash basis, with some very current assets for accounts receivable and also accounts payable. But you'll see a total fund balance, and just kind of, again, looking at your general fund, you'll see a total fund balance of 31 million there. And as Mark mentioned, we know that 14.4 of that is going to be used for capital projects going into fiscal year 22. But regardless, if you look at page 18, your total expenditures for the general fund for operations were $31,674,000. So still, even with the expenditures that you're anticipating for fiscal year 22 for capital projects, you're in a position where you can do that because of your fund balance.
And we do have some,
What's the landfill line item? I think we talk about that every year, but.
The landfill, if the fund's restricted for landfill, yeah, that's just basically, it's kind of setting aside some fund balance, but this is on a current focus, so therefore that's not included as a liability.
this is
On
goes
these.
way back to when I was doing the audit back in the 80s when we closed the landfill. That's how old it is. And they had to set aside funds based on what the return would be and making the annual monitoring they got to do, whatever.
The EPD kind of does almost an actuarial calculation of
some
future
funds-
anticipated costs.
There may be some funds at the end of that closure out of that, but right now it's all restricted. We don't control that number.
That's right. Just like when you used to have, your pension funds, it's one of those actuarial type things almost. So again, Mark mentioned the American Rescue Plan Act. I wanted to point out that is a new fund, and you'll see that on page 16. There is $6.2 million in cash
What page, I'm sorry.
Page 16.
Okay, I'm sorry.
$6.2 million in cash, unearned revenue of $6,194,000. There was $50,000 spent out of that fund for water and sewer type projects, if I'm remembering correctly. So that's the $50,000 that you'll see in interfund payable, and also as reported as revenue on that fund on page 18. That revenue is recognized as spent. Just to point out, I won't go over it in any detail, the general fund budget versus actual, a lot of people like to look at that, is on page 20. Your more detailed financial statements for your enterprise funds, your business type activities, we talked about water, and Mark talked about water and sewer and wastewater treatment plant earlier. Those begin on page 24 of the financial statements.
I did note, just to say to staff, I noticed the property and sales tax original budget with what we actually got was very conservative. And I'm hoping in this budget we won't be quite so conservative because we got a lot of needs and challenges that we get a little closer in that line item.
We actually talked about that in the audit, the fact that that budget amendment was required, and Mark said, it was just that it was a lot higher than they anticipated as they were going through the year and
And we've always
modified as
been real
necessary.
conservative the way we did that. I think in the past, they would take the average for the last 3 years and use that as the revenue to budget from. And I'm thinking we need, in a growing county like this, we need to be looking at maybe taking last year's and beginning with it with a maybe very small increase or something.
Okay.
Yeah, we usually do a calculation on that based on just the digest and the rate. And I think on that one, we started off, I think there was a change in the rate structure between the M&O and the special tax district
Okay,
from when the budget was put together, and I think that was the main
that may be the
contribution
reason,
to that.
okay.
Yes, sir.
The notes start on page 29, and I won't go over those in detail. I just would like to point out a few things. On
You just answered my
page,
previous question, what you just said, I was catching up.
on page 42, those are your capital asset notes. So that's going to show your capital asset additions, as well as any deductions or sales. You'll see on page 42 towards the top, the first line item is land. The $7 million deduction on there, that's the basis in that Grandview sale. The long-term debt notes start on page 44. And the schedule on page 46 is a good one. That's going to show your changes in long-term debt during the year, and you'll see the most significant change during the year was towards maybe not quite a third of the way down the page on the bonds payable line. You'll see $35 million for the new bond that's within the T-SWAS fund.
Can I point out something for our commission, just so they be
Sure.
aware as we go through this budget and all? If you guys will move to page 25, I want to show you something there. And I appreciate the firm moving the cost recovery fees that used to be up in the operating income down to the other income. That gives a much better presentation, I think. Just want the commission to notice that if you put the wastewater treatment loss together of that 1.3 million and the 47 that we're having on the water and sewer operating, you see those two numbers? Income before capital contributions and transfers
On 25?
on page 25.
I don't see that.
All right, look where it says income loss before capital contributions and transfers. Yeah, operating revenues, operating expenses, operating income loss,
Yeah, I see
non-operating.
that.
All right, just want you to note that in water and sewer with wastewater treatment, we are losing about almost $4 million. So we are funding that through our cost recovery and our transfers in from the special district monies, whether it's taxes or whatever. And so that's just something we need to be aware of as you and I met yesterday with folks and the challenges we have in the water and sewer. We just gotta keep that before us. We are not, this is why we don't wanna lose the opportunity.
Where are you pulling the
When you-
$4 million figure from?
I see 1.1 there.
1.4, I said.
Oh, 1.4.
Oh, I thought you said
Okay.
4.
No, 1.4,
Oh, okay.
around 1.4.
Sanitation.
Yeah, I got you. I thought you said
Yeah,
4.
I'm not forgetting sanitation, I'm talking about just the
Oh,
water
just
and
water and
sewer.
sewer plus the water treatment.
So as we look at our rates, look at what we've got to do, why it's important for us to make sure we get the multifamily housing on our systems and the residential on our systems, and we have the system in place, because we've got to it's not a sustainable model to continue to lose $1.4 million a year and support it with cost recovery, which is supposed to be used for expanding and repairing your system. But we're using it to take care of current operations. So at the end of the period, when these things run out, we've used all those resources for renewal and extension, for paying salaries and buying water and operating. Just want to keep that before the board. We have to address that.
And if I could bring up something on that as well, and I think it was this year was the first year in a while that just the actual water and sewer operating was at a positive number.
Yes, that was a good thing.
And so we're slowly trying to get us up into a revenue picture where once we combine the two funds, hopefully on the operating side, we can run on rates and then do the repairs, maintenance, R&R on cost and debt service on cost recovery. So, but we're a good distance from there, but we're making progress.
Yeah. And especially, when you're looking at these governmental financial statements, and some of it's cash basis or modified accrual, some of it's full accrual basis. When you're looking at these, I'll just point out on the statement of cash flows on page 26. You'll see for the water and sewer operating fund, you'll see a decrease in cash of $1 million for the year. But you'll also see $1.3 million that was a purchase of capital assets. You've also got debt service in there. There was an increase in cash, and I'm looking down about 2/3 of the way down the page, in the wastewater treatment plant of $948,000. And again, that's, mostly, like you said, coming from those capital cost recovery fees. But in addition to funding the current operations, it is also funding some debt service as well for past capital projects. Okay, so we went over the changes in long-term debt on page 46. I don't really think there's a lot of additional stuff to note in the note disclosures. The detailed financial statements that kind of roll up into the more summarized ones in the front start on page 51. So if you want any more detail on those numbers, you can look towards the back. And I know that if you have any questions, Mark can help you through those. The SPLOST schedule, as Mark mentioned, there is the 2017 SPLOST that was active for fiscal year 21. That schedule is on page 73, and you also have the T-SPLOST schedule on page 74. None of the activity that was in that fund during the past fiscal year was funded through T-SPLOST taxes. We have our report on internal control and compliance that starts on page 75. Page 77, as Mark mentioned, we did have a single audit. So you'll see the schedule of expenditures of federal awards on page 77, and that'll give you a little more detail about what makes those numbers up. And again, it was the single audit was due to the COVID-19 funds, the Coronavirus Relief Fund, and you'll see that there was $2.5 million received on that in the last fiscal year. Mark mentioned some findings. Those are on page 82. We did have two in the tax commissioner's office that we considered material weaknesses. These were sort of repeat things. The tax commissioner accumulated some excess in a PayPal account. That was not resolved, and instead it was just moved over into another account. So we feel like further procedures are necessary. I mean, the funds are due to somebody else. Financial statements are not misstated, but further procedures are needed to just kind of nail all of that down and make sure we know where all of that stuff needs to go. And also on the bank reconciliations, there were a lot of duplicate items. One of the things that you can do in these custodial funds, compare your ending cash balance, and it's what we always do in audit procedures, compare your ending cash balance to what you owe out next month, and they should be pretty close. When you don't have bank reconciliations that are correct, you can't do that. So we just recommend that they work on cleaning that up, maybe do some more training. They did implement some not new software, but some new functionality in the software that they were using in the clerk of court's office. And they started preparing their bank reconciliations using the software that they were also using for receipting instead of using QuickBooks as well, which is a good thing, but there were a lot of duplicate deposits, and again, it creates the same issue.
When they do their duplicate deposits, they gotta pay that money out to somebody. Did they pay it out twice?
No, they did not.
Okay.
They did
So
not.
it's just
No,
sitting-
and that's what I'm saying. If you have a bank reconciliations, no, they did not pay the money out
They're
twice.
not doing a monthly bank reconciliation? or-
They're doing a monthly bank reconciliation, but there are deposits on there that show as outstanding, and they're just not outstanding. They've already
Reconciled.
cleared in another month. Yeah, it's
That's why I
just,
was asking the question, if it came to the receipts summary,
you'll
that
see 'em on the
receipts gets distributed to, us, to others and so forth, and are they distributing that deposit twice?
no, with the way the software worked, they did not distribute the money twice, and we
They should've
did
went
check
back
that
and-
and make sure. It just showed it as a,
Find out why it's in there.
That's
twice
right.
Instead of,
but the receipts were not in, the money was not distributed twice, of that we're sure.
How about the PayPal,
Otherwise, it wouldn't have created an excess.
the tax, office and the PayPal account, has it been distributed to the appropriate government
Well, again,
entities?
and that's,
But has the people who paid that got credit against their taxes?
I feel like I feel like they most likely did, but again, further procedures are needed to make sure that we've got all of that where it needs to go, and that's why it's a material weakness.
Yeah, probably we need to have somebody from the tax commissioner office to help us understand that, because one or two things happen. Either the deposit, they don't know where it came from, that's why they can't distribute it, and they need to go back and research that, or they know where it has come from and they have it distributed and they're holding money. There is statutes, I think, that says money has to be distributed in a certain amount of time of receiving it for constitutional officer. So for either of those reasons, we probably need to just come explain to us how they're gonna clean this up and take care of this. Because is this not a repeat?
And that's why I said it's a material weakness
Repeat
for sure,
finding?
because it is a repeat finding, yes.
Repeat finding, so here we are another year, and it's not, I'd like to just know that they gonna clean that up and fix that.
same thing on the.
I
past
remember that from last
reconciliations.
On the reconciliations, they really just need to clean off the old duplicate items, so they can look and they can say, as of the end of March, my balance is $450,000. Here's the list of checks that I've got to cut, and it equals just about $450,000, maybe with a little bit of extra interest or something. And that's a great internal control to have, but you have to have the bank reconciliation to be able to do
System
it.
balance is never gonna match the bank balance. as long as
That's
it's
right.
in.
That's right. So
How old are the duplicates? I mean,
the duplicates in the tax commissioner's, the clerk of court's office were new this year. And in the last part of the year, it was just a training issue with them learning to do the bank reconciliations, and perhaps sometimes they would have a deposit that was combined in one place, and maybe it was split out in 3 different ways in the other place, and they didn't realize it was the same, and they wound up duplicating it. So, and putting it into the bank reconciliation module, basically, from what I understand, and that's why it didn't get distributed out. If it had gotten distributed out, it wouldn't have created an excess.
the
So,
old ones
the
did.
tax commissioners, again, this is a repeat finding, and the duplicates are old in there. I think for the most part, they're not putting duplicates in there anymore, but not having the bank reconciliation that will agree to what you're supposed to pay out the next month still makes it harder to implement that internal control.
Right.
And that concludes my report.
We appreciate it. Thank you. Any questions from the board?
I don't.
All righty. Thank
All
you
right,
so
thank
much
y'all.
for your service. That concludes business one, which is our presentation. Item number 2 is consideration to approve to transmit the 2021 audit findings report to the state of Georgia. I don't see any reason not to go ahead and submit this to the State Department of Audits as part of keeping our local government status. So do you have a motion to approve that?
Make a motion to approve the audit.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Deloach, second by Mr. Loper to approve the audit and transmit it to the state of Georgia. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Item number 3, consideration to approve resolution 22-022 to amend the 21-22 fiscal year budget.
Staff is requesting approval for an amendment to the 2022 budget. This amendment will provide additional funding for outfitting for a new magistrate court uniformed employee. It'll also have additional funding for coroner fees for a higher caseload than originally budgeted for. And it's going to reallocate some existing EMS funding for the software. The software is going to be used for scheduling the employees and for vehicle maintenance. And it also allocates funding and the GMA grant revenue that we accepted in a prior meeting for the GMA equipment grant. Staff recommends alternative number 1, approve the resolution to amend the budget for fiscal year 2022.
Any questions or discussions with Mr. Mark?
I'll make a motion to approve alternative 1. Second.
Motion by Mr. Deloach, second by Mr. Floyd to approve alternative 1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Item number 4 is a T-Splosh. Consideration to approve the final distribution of the Transportation Special Local Option Sales Tax T-Splosh bond proceeds allocated to Springfield and Guyton.
So staff is requesting to distribute the remainder of the T-Splosh bond proceeds to those 2 cities, Guyton and Springfield. Back on August 3rd, the county dispersed 25% of the T-Splosh bond proceeds that were set aside for Springfield and Guyton. And since that time, the updated T-Splosh IGA has been executed and transmitted to the state. And they have confirmed that going forward, the T-Splosh proceeds will be dispersed directly to the county in accordance with that IGA. This payment request is to disperse the remaining bond proceeds to each city, adjusted for those amounts they've already received directly from the Department of Revenue in the interim period. Staff is requesting alternative number 1, approve to disperse funds to Springfield and Guyton.
Any questions, discussion, or motion?
I probably have a dumb question, but do we subtract our bond fees or interest before we distribute their part of the T-Splosh?
No, sir, this was just a straight calculation of the original amounts from the debt issuance, about how much was allocated to Guyton, the 1.4 million.
So how do we recapture that? Because I know we'll have fees as a county, won't we, if we get them through a bond versus we're getting them in advance, or we're paying for that in some way.
Right, and in the IGA, what's gonna happen is throughout the fiscal year, we're gonna accumulate, their T-Splosh proceeds are coming directly to the county, and they do accumulate until we get to that annual debt service amount, and then we pay that, and then any T-Splosh proceeds we get above that are gonna be distributed,
So we do have a mechanism to capture those costs.
That's right. We didn't give them, we gave them a percentage of the debt service, not percentage of the revenues
Of the actual
coming
allocation.
in. So therefore, when they pay it back, they're paying back the service fees and interest as well.
Okay. Thank you.
And we didn't borrow 100%.
What's that?
We did not borrow 100%. We did not borrow 100% of the expected T-Splosh.
Oh, no.
So there will be a back end to make sure
yeah,
we're true
it-
up.
I see. Those-
Yeah, and since we are more than likely going to collect the full $45 million on this, it will, at the end, we will probably be distributing additional funds to Springfield and Guyton.
Right. But to his point, at the end of the day, they will cover all the financing fees for that bond
Yeah,
amount.
'cause they're getting
The
it in advance just like
1.75
we are.
rate plus
Yes.
city fees, it will be covered. Yeah. Okay?
But not so with Rankin, right? Because
But yeah, Rankin didn't
didn't
need
get
to
it.
borrow
Yeah,
funds.
if they didn't
They're
participate.
just gonna get their percentage as it comes in. All right, do you have a motion to approve alternative 1?
Make
Make
a
a motion
motion
to approve all number 1.
second.
Motion by Mr. Loper, second by Mr. Burdette, to approve alternative 1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Item number 5, consideration to approve to accept participation in the Georgia Department of Community Health, DCH, to join the Georgia Medicaid Fee-for-Service, FFS, Ground Ambulance Upper Payment Limit Supplemental Payment Program.
Okay, this is for acceptance of funds from the Department of Community Health, netting out to about $2,500. This was a grant-like supplement program with the formula amounts based on past ambulance rides for Medicaid patients. The county application was approved in the April 20th, 2021 Commissioners meeting, and the payment for this has been electronically received from the state, by the county.
Okay.
Staff recommends alternative number 1, approve to accept participation in the Georgia Medicaid FFS Ground Ambulance UPL program.
Any question, discussion, or motion?
Make a motion to approve alternative 1.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Burdette, second by Mr. Kiefer, to approve alternative 1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Item number 6, consideration to approve acceptance of a grant award and a contract with American Kennel Club Companion Animal Recovery Corporation That's the Canine Support and Relief Fund.
Staff is requesting the acceptance of this award. The grant award was a 16-foot by 7-foot trailer to provide citizens with co-location shelters where people can remain with their pets in the event that we've been evacuated for a hurricane or some similar disaster. The animal shelter intends to store this trailer at the dry waste collection site when not in use.
Yeah, we approved the application just a week or two, a meeting or two ago.
I guess so.
So this is the receipt of the monies now?
It's actually a trailer, yeah. There's not gonna,
Trailer,
yeah.
yeah, okay.
Quick,
It was real quick. Motion for alternative one?
make a motion to approve alternative one.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Burdette, second, Mr. Deloach, for alternative one. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Item number 7, public hearing. Public hearing on closure of right-of-way of Laracy Trowell Road. So we'll open a public hearing, and we'll listen to Mr. Larson to start with.
Good evening, Commission. Eric Larson, County Engineer. Tonight's item is a request from the residents of Lacey Trowell Road to close the said road. If you look on the petition that's included with the packet, there's only 2 property owners and 4 parcels, 3 owned by the same family, and the family last name is Trowell. So this is a road that's kind of a legacy road, I guess, has been around for a while. There's no public benefit to this road. We have other alternative routes. I've checked with all of our emergency services and law enforcement to get their concurrence with the closure. There's also a map showing you the sections to be closed from Josiah Morgan over to Clio Shawnee. So we are required by law to announce that we're going to do this. There'll be a 30-day commenting period. Tonight's the first public hearing. In a month, we'll have another public meeting, and at that time, you will vote to abandon the road. There's no right-of-way, so this is just simply abandonment of its maintenance.
And it doesn't create any easement problems to anybody's property?
No, sir. There's no easements that we need for drainage or otherwise. No access concerns because the property owners property owners all have frontage on one of those other side roads, Josiah Morgan or Clio Shawnee.
We are in a public hearing. Is anyone tonight that would like to speak in favor of this road closure? Anyone tonight that'd like to speak in opposition to this road closure? Hearing no one coming forward, or seeing no one coming forward, I'll close the public hearing, see if there's any discussion or a motion from the board.
Can the property owner still maintain it if they wish? The property owner still maintain it if they wish?
Be theirs, yeah.
This is
The
gonna go-
road is actually still the property owner's property. It
Oh,
never,
it is?
yeah,
It's
it never
private
got,
road?
yeah, it's technically a private road. It never got deeded and
Oh,
is.
this is a county road.
Well,
No.
it's more of a prescriptive easement, I guess, if anything, right?
I got you.
I don't know.
Prescriptive
We've
because
been
we've used it
maintaining
for so long, is that what prescription is?
It was county maintained by prescriptive easement. We do not have right-of-way.
Okay, maybe that.
Okay.
If you look real closely at the map, the property line's the center of the road.
So it's pretty much a private road we've been maintaining.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Yes.
The
And
surrounding-
once we abandon, they intend to gate it, and they're having trespass problems. People
So it's not
doing
gonna hurt
things
their
they don't
feelings.
want done on their private road, or their road, so they want to make it private and close it off.
Very good. Do I have a motion for alternative one?
I'll make a
to
motion.
approve alternative one.
Second.
Second.
All right, motion by Mr. Burdette, second by Mr. Deloach to approve alternative one. All in favor say aye. Any opposed, no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously.
So how would this proceed over the next 30 days? Is there,
Well, we've announced tonight, there's signs up.
So is there another public hearing or that's it? In a month, okay.
Okay. So you can't
Just
do,
kind of announcing we're not doing anything else, because we don't have any, there's no true right-of-way, we're not turning a,
we'll just have another.
County road over to
It'll be
a
another
private
agenda in
road.
a month for another brief public hearing, and then we'll close it. Okay?
basically
Yes.
relinquishing all rights to,
Correct. Yeah, I asked Lee to give me advice on how to do this, and it was suggested, even though there's no right-of-way to abandon, we just treat this as if, and we announce, we have the 30-day period. So tonight's the announcement, the intent of, similar to what we did on DeWitt, we announced we intended to close, but we won't do that for 30 days. You'll vote in 30 days in the meeting in May to do that.
Very good. Thank you. Item number 8, under new business, consideration to approve an agreement with ESRI Enterprise for the annual renewal installment payment.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pamela Meltzer. I'm the GIS coordinator for the Effingham County GIS Department, and we are here to consider a it's an installment payment, a third of the fee that Esri charges for our enterprise license agreement. It allows us to do data editing, mapping, and support several of the departments in the county with data and analytics. And we've been using the software for the past 14 years, and we'd like to continue using it so we can keep using those maps and creating all the information for everyone.
This is that fee that we thought would go down when we started using spatial engineering, but did not go down. They threw us a curveball, so we gotta hang on to it. Any questions, discussion? Motion for, go ahead.
How far are we along as far as updating? I know we've been working on that for.
Updating what exactly? The data?
The scanning?
The scanning, we completed the first round of it. That's under a different contract. We did a 12,000 sheet scans for that, and we actually have a upcoming proposal for that and turning that into digital data for feature extraction. So that'll allow us to light up more of the water, sewer infrastructure in the southern half of the county.
Thank you.
I thought that's what we were already doing.
What was the first phase for then? That was just the
That was
plats?
just for the scanning of the data, or the actual plats are over in the archives. And then this is
Plats
gonna
and
be
archives that had never
changing
been
the
scanned
scans
into the
into
system.
digital data that we can actually utilize for analysis.
Okay.
And as we're getting that in, and we just had a meeting on water and sewer yesterday, as we're getting that in, it's immediately being sent over to Alliance to be included in our water and sewer
Modeling
modeling
studies, yeah.
in the master plan.
Yeah, I'm
So it's
like that.
immediately being utilized.
Yeah, I was thinking we were already doing some scanning of our water and sewer lines. We weren't doing that in this
We
first
do,
contract?
we do have it as it's coming through with as-built that are new developments, but this is the backlog data that wouldn't have been digitized or digitally extracted in
So
the
the
first
master
place.
plan will have all of this. Maybe I'm confused with that, but I thought we were already in process of getting all this together.
I don't understand the question. So
You said there was another phase to do the water and sewer backlog. Yeah. And I thought that was all part of these old plats of subdivisions that were not scanned in, that we were doing that at one time so we could start seeing where we have water systems here, sewer here, what size lines, and
Brad Clement Development Services. It was a two-phase thing all along. So you have piles of paper data, has to be gone through to determine what is what gets scanned, where are redundant coverages, what's as-built data, what is plan submitted, never built. That process has been completed. Now that we know what was good, we have that from a paper dusty copy and, digits on the computer. Now they can do the extraction from a scanned image into GIS vector layers that can be turned into GIS data to support and feed those modeling efforts. So, it was never going to be immediate. We had to see what we had.
That's what I missed. It was two-phase,
Yeah.
two-phase. Is it one
First
contract?
step is seeing what we got.
one contract, two phases, or
Yes.
two?
Right.
Okay, that's what it is. It does include it in what they give us. I got you. It was
Okay.
just the first phase of it.
All right,
was
sorry.
completed.
Right, so,
I'm with you.
and,
I was
and the
confused.
way that the costing works, right?
Yeah.
There was no sense in to pay one price until we knew what we had, what the size of the job was, and scope it out, and see where we go from there.
Phase one of the contract is completed, we're in
It
phase two.
just took sheer manpower, right?
Yeah.
I
Yes.
mean, it was just a heavy.
Yes, it was a heavy lift.
How far were we behind? How many years?
Well, we've gone through 12,000 sheets and we haven't touched all the file cabinets over in the archives, so we're gonna be doing another scanning load and then more digital extraction, so there's a lot of data out there.
Yeah, one thing I really appreciate about this board right now is there's been a lot of work over the last 4 or 5 years, 6 years, to really do a cleanup on aisle 6. And because, and we need that because of going forward. In our growth plans,
A lot of
the
mopping.
master plans we've authorized to be done, so we can really sit down in these workshops and really strategize and plan. So I think it's commendable that you're working on it, that we want to support it financially and get it done. We're going to leave the information system, with your help, in better shape than it was when we got it, right?
Definitely, that is the plan.
Okay. Chris, you want to say something?
Chris Reed, IT Director. a lot of those paper plans that we've got go back to the 70s and then come forward to when we started taking digital copies. As far as what's in the GIS, we had models of the main lines already in GIS, but this is taking you down into the subdivision levels
Right.
and getting all of the fine detail and everything. There was some, like I said, the main lines were detailed in GIS. So there was some data already there. We're just trying to get
Yeah,
everything
well,
else
the
in there.
multiple subdivisions that have been developed
Trying
over
to get
the
it all.
years, that's gonna greatly impact the modeling of the pressure and water quality, I'm sure.
Yes, sir.
All right, good discussion. We're on item number 8. So is there a motion for alternative 1?
Make a motion to approve number 1.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Loper, second by Mr. Deloach to approve alternative 1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. And it carries unanimously. Thank you guys for your hard work on that. I know that's gotta be tedious and makes you pull your hair out and need a little extra wine at night. Item number 9, consideration to approve amendment number 1 for the contract with Crowder Gulf for disaster debris removal.
Hi, good evening, Allison Bruton, purchasing agent. The county currently has a pre-event contract in place for disaster debris removal with Crowder Gulf. Along with the renewal for another year, they have requested a rate increase of 7.9% based on overall inflation. So staff recommends alternative 1.
Any questions or discussion? Have a motion?
Make a motion to approve alternative 1.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Burdette, second by Mr. Deloach for alternative 1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Excuse me. Item number 10, consideration to approve agreement 22-55-001 with McWright LLC for the construction of the Guyton Fire Station number 13.
Yes, sir. An ITB was posted in February requesting quotes for the construction of Fire Station number 13 in Guyton. 4 bids were received, and the breakdown, the tabulation should be included in your packets. Staff has reviewed the proposal and recommends award to McWright. We recommend alternative 1.
Any questions or discussion?
I love seeing the lowest cost one on there. That's all I want to say. It's nice to see.
Do I have a motion for approve alternative 1?
Make a motion to approve alternative 1.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Burdette, and I'll take Mr. Floyd so he can get in the game here.
I didn't hear anybody else.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Item number 11, consideration to approve a list for vehicles for order from Enterprise Fleet Management.
Yes, sir. So there's 4 vehicles on this list, 1 for facilities maintenance, 2 which will actually be for the Commissioner's Department, and another which will actually replace the current pool Traverse that we have, which ultimately will lower the monthly payment on that. The staff recommends alternative 1.
Questions or discussion?
Make a motion to approve alternative 1.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Deloach, second by Mr. Loper to approve alternative 1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. And I do hope, Mark, that we'll be able to do that as a capital lease and show these assets, because they still are value to us versus an operating lease on our financial statements. I know it's more complicated, but I'd like to see it that way if we could.
It's more, that's why I was asking. I
Yeah,
wonder if
I
it's
knew
still,
you were.
and see the differential between having assets before and then not.
Yeah.
It's gonna be, look
Yeah.
like there's a large gap when there really isn't.
I think with the new GASB 87, we're going to have to, which,
Have to show it as a capital or operating? Yeah, I'd rather show it as a capital. That's
Seeing
good.
more and more people.
I'm
headed
fine
that
with them
way, so.
mandating that versus giving counties options.
we budgeted for them that way too and everything, so that's how we expect.
Yeah.
I gotta give some kudos to staff on this enterprise thing. We wouldn't be able to get vehicles with the state of the
I hadn't thought about that. It might have
world
been
that
really
we're in
difficult to
right now.
replace if we didn't
supply
have some
chain
operating
issues. We would be in trouble.
Well,
relationship.
It's such a bizarre market right now
It
that
is.
we just got a vehicle last year and we're already trading it in for a net, basically, a net positive equity in it. And it's just because used prices are more expensive than new in many cases, and we're able to get allocated vehicles, so,
But
we're-
even being able to get a vehicle
yeah.
and have negotiating power, we'd be on our own in a bad way, really would.
All right, I guess it's important we have credit cards on our vending machines. So item number 12, consideration to approve service and client agreement with NAEX to allow for credit card transactions for vending machines so that you can have your cracker and Coke.
Yes. It's very important that everybody go use the vending
I
machine.
don't carry cash anymore,
And
so
buy
if you
stuff.
don't
So
use a
there you
debit card, I
go.
can't
No
buy it.
excuses now. So yes, this credit card machine in particular, this brand, was recommended by the vending machine company. The processing fee per transaction is 5.95%. And there is a $9.95 monthly fee for the use of the machine. But there is a two-tiered option, which would charge the consumer 10 cents per transaction, which would cover the cost of the processing fees if the board wants to go that route. Most of the items in the machine are 50 cents to $1.
Do we make any money on this?
Big money here,
We-
guys.
We're not trying to make money off this. This is just a convenience for our staff and
It is.
guests. It didn't.
We do make sure that the items are priced so that, one, I don't hear complaints from people that want to go buy them, but two, that we're not losing money as well, because the taxpayers don't need to fund our snack habit.
So there's not a minimum, it's just a percentage.
I don't believe, correct, yeah. It's, it was based on a,
So high.
yeah, there was a tiered,
On $1, you gotta do something to get
Yeah,
your
yeah.
money back.
Six,
So do I have a motion to approve alternative one?
Make a motion to approve alternative one.
A second.
Motion, Mr. Burdette, second, Mr. Kiefer, to approve alternative one. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. And it passes unanimously.
thank you.
Thank you. Item number 13, consideration to approve the creation of a pavement management program and contract with First Step Pavement Management to conduct an assessment of all county roads in the amount of $57,000.
Mr. Chairman, while Mr. Darrell Gardner with Argonne Pavement and Emulsion gets his computer set up and prepares to present, I'll just introduce this topic. He's gonna do a short presentation explaining what we're recommending the purchase of, and that is this one-step pavement management system. Since I've been here, one of my goals has been to try to figure out how to get my head around and hands around road maintenance. Roads are probably the most visual of all of our infrastructure, and the first ones we get complaints about: potholes, repaving, et cetera. And we have limited funds. Even with T-Splost, we're still limited, and now that people are actually paying that penny for transportation, they want to see results. And so we want to come up with a program that maximizes that dollar and makes our system, our pavement system, the best it can be. We're doing that now with the T-Splost, that influx of money. We were able to go all over the county and hit multiple roads in each district, and we've really, hit the ground running with the T-Splost. The paving's almost done. The full depth reclamation of Ash Roads is beginning. It's very soon, but this coming up year, there's going to be a slight lull in our spending because we're going to be between T-Splost and the new SPLOST money. Next year, we have $1 million per district for $5 million to go with our LMIG money. And so again, you'll see us ramp up and do a bunch of roads at once. And so what this is an attempt to come up with a method to the madness, so to speak, is to come up with a way to really make some data-driven decision on what roads we're going to touch, how we're going to touch them, so that we maximize that dollar and get the best life of our pavement system. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Darrell Gardner. He's with Argonne. He drove all the way over here from Arkansas for this meeting.
That's right.
He's going to introduce his team. One Step is not a company; it is a system that has many partners, and you're going to see through this presentation how they've already helped us on a small scale in a pilot program. And what we're asking for tonight, as he'll explain, I'll come back and finish up the staff report, is an investment in a much larger effort. So,
thank you, Eric. As he said, my name is Darrell Gardner. I work with Argonne Asphalt and Emulsions, and I'm happy to be here, honored to be here and talk about First Step Pavement Management. First Step Pavement Management is not a company, as he said. We started in Arkansas, and it was just a group of professionals that got together to help our cities and counties. We had a lot of counties that just didn't have a means of keeping up with the work they were doing. It wasn't historical. It's just every time New people came in, they had to start from scratch, basically. And so we just saw this problem, and we wanted to help our cities and counties. And so we teamed up with, and you can look right here, you kind of see the team. Arkansas Technology Transfer, that's Dr. Stacy Williams. She's with the University of Arkansas. They have the whole research center over there. And she does education throughout our state for cities and counties. She passes on, our Arkansas Department of Transportation funds her, and she does a big educator. If you're going to do any quality control testing in Arkansas, you have to go through her certification program, and that includes the employees at Arkansas Department of Transportation. So she is such a huge educator, and to me, she's the unbiased voice. We wanted to have a very unbiased program, and she's our unbiased voice. Data Stream does the heavy lifting. They do all the data. That's Mr. Michael Morgan, and he's got patrolmen that go out and collect this data. And he's actually the one that you would be paying, because I work with Ergon, and of course Dr. Williams, she's an educator. And my experience has just been, since 1986, I've been in the pavement preservation business. So whether you're smart or not, it'll rub off on you at some point. And so that has been my skill set. And so we're not a company. We just came together to try to help. And we were apparently somewhat successful. We won a National Association of Counties Achievement Award. We did it here in Georgia, of course. We couldn't do it in Arkansas, where I'm from. We got an achievement award down here somewhere. So, but we're very happy about the program. And I'm going to give you some brief details about the program and a little bit about us. So our data goals, we have a lot of data goals, and you see them listed, but I want to just touch on a couple, because we're going to get to the rest of them here in a moment. We realize that we need to have very transparent information that comes back. And so our main goal is to give you transparent pavement condition data. And why is transparency important? Because if it's transparent, we can all talk about it, we can all view it, we can communicate it. We kind of all can buy into it because it's very transparent and we can see it. It also holds the data accountable. If you can, the more transparent our information is, the more you're going to see it and know when it's right and when it's wrong, right? So it holds the data accountable. Something else, we're also our goal is to be empowering. We don't want to educate and help Effingham County be self-sufficient with this data. You won't need anybody else. We're always a team to be there to help, and we do help people plan their programs out, but that's not our goal. Our goal is to be able to provide information so you guys can make your own decision and be successful, and we'll have some success metrics attached to some of this. Here's a quote that kind of hit me, and if it tells you who I am, I start reading books like Winning with Data, so I don't know what that means, but that's where my life has come. I love data, and data alone is not powerful enough to inspire us to change. We have to be interwoven with passion and with conviction and with emotion, such that when we use all that together, we become great storytellers. We want to be a great storyteller of your road system, what's going on there. Nobody loves your roads like you do, and nobody hates your roads like you do. It's very intimate. Roads are what you drive on. Roads are, you're with them every day. And so what we'd like to do is provide data coupled with your drive to be successful, in such a way that you can change the way that maybe you do things today. Okay, this is a typical pavement regression curve, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds with this, but I do want you to pay attention to the color codes, because that appears repeatedly in the data that we give back. And the idea is that 100 is good and 0 is very, very bad. And so when a road is first paved and it's brand new, we have a PCI, Pavement Condition Index, of 100. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing we can do to it. You just finish it. It's perfect shape. And over time, down at the bottom, you see we have age in years. As time goes by, these pavements are going to become oxidized and start cracking. That cracking leads to structural problems. The structural problems lead to a call zone where everybody starts complaining because the road's not driving well. And so we want to track where all segments of your pavements are. When that condition changes out there, we want to be able to report that back. And it's very important. So the distresses that we see, they define what the condition is, and we follow an ASTM D6433 standard. And you can Google that and research that if you'd like, but it's a standard by which you collect data. The only difference is we don't take isolated areas and extrapolate the information out. We're going to actually go drive 100% of your network. So I bring this up to say that it costs a lot less money to take care of our pavements. And so if I looked right here, and this is the same 30-year time frame, and so it's decisions that we make. Within 30 years, we can decide, and have a plan for it, a data-driven plan, that we start taking care of pavements from the time that we build them. We already have a plan for them. In year 7, when we start seeing it oxidize and we see our first cracks come through, what a great time to keep water out of it, because it's just now getting started. And what we can see from this regression curve is that as we do those treatments over the same time frame, not only is it going to cost us less, but our pavements are going to be good. That pavement's going to last and be good for a long period of time. Now, we have to build it right. We have to design it right and build it right. But so if you look at that scenario right there, that is, if we were to have a planned, data-driven approach and take care of a pavement. Over 30 years, we get out here and, you know, it might drop a little bit, and the pavement is going to wear out over time. No telling what kind of floods and weather that we have. And then there's another approach, which is that we just let it go along until we start hearing from the public that the road's bad. And we get complaints, and my road's not driving good, I have potholes, those types of things. The public does not see cracking. They'll drive over it, and as long as it's smooth and it's not messing their drive up, we really don't see cracking, but we really focus in on cracking, because cracking is what is letting water into our pavement. It's going to be our demise over time. And so oftentimes we see that our projects get selected down at the bottom of the regression curve, and the reason we're there is because we have to be there. This road is getting bad and we have to do something about it. So it costs us so much more money, and you can look directionally. It says $2 for preventive and $20 for reconstruction. Directionally, that's accurate. I don't know if it's exactly the scale, but it does cost us so much money to rebuild a road, obviously, and take care of it. So within the same time frame, we can spend more money and have a worse network, or we can spend the same amount of money, hopefully, and just have a much more vibrant network. So we did a pilot project for you guys, and on the left you can see the names of the roads. That's the inventory we were given. Inventory is very important. And then on the right you can see kind of the results from a condition standpoint. And we could put the distresses on there, but they muddle the lines and you can't really see the lines. So this was the pilot project, and this was for some LMIG projects that were coming up. And so we wanted to be able to look at these roads we were given and decide what should we do to these pavements. Now, a little bit about some of the information that we have is we use something that's called dynamic segmentation. And so what that means, and if you can kind of follow my mouse, when we drive on a road, as that condition changes, we change that condition line. We do this live on board with what we're talking about when we're driving these roads. So as the condition improves or gets worse, you see it in real time. Okay, and so what I see is an excellent condition, good. I see every condition level on this segment. I believe this is Little McCall or Little, maybe that's what the name of the road is. But so other systems, and the reason we talk about transparency, this tells me the story of this road. What we used to do is we would take sample areas, and then we would get a PCI, pavement condition index, that number from 0 to 100, and we would take sample areas, and then we'd put this information in. We'd take an average, and so maybe the average PCI is 72.5 or something like that. Well, then we would say, well, 72.5 is a fair condition road, and then we'd mark this all road as being a yellow road. It's fair condition. Well, this tells a better story. Dynamic segmentation allows us to see exactly when it changes. It's all geolocated. So even though this too is a 72.5 PCI, it tells a more descriptive picture of what you're getting. When we're out there, because we can geolocate the conditions, we find the potholes that you have that are out there. Edge conditions, we call those potholes too. These are kind of the distresses. We find your structural distresses, and there's different levels of that. And then we come back to this cracking data. It's so important to understand where our pavements are at that point, because that's earlier in the regression curve. It's really where we can get some good bang for our dollars, add significant service life for less money. And so we do focus on that. We also pick up some drainage issues. This is not intended to find all your drainage problems, but it is intended to, while we're there, if we see some drainage issues, water standing in the road or ditches full that aren't moving, then we'll report that back to you. So I'll talk a little bit about that transparency. And so when we set a camera upon your road and you really get some good clear imagery back, this is the transparency level I'm talking about. So we will drive 100% of your network, and you'll be able to sit at your desk and drive your entire network too. I think you have 544 paved miles, and if you'll give me a second, if you have 544 miles and it's all 2 lanes, then you got 544 and 544, so you have 1,088 lane miles, what we would call it, lane miles. And as much as I drove down here, I know that driving back, for me to go 1,088 miles, I would go to Oklahoma City plus 5 miles. I think it's 1,083 miles to there. just to see the complexity of networks. You have a lot of pavement in your county, and sometimes you have to put it in perspective. I don't think people appreciate just how much pavement that you actually have out there. And so we wanted very transparent information so that you could use this information. This clarity, I talked about the transparency, gives us a really, really good transparency. This is the data. What we see right here is the data that we are trying to represent. So when we get through, I talked about those distresses, covering up those lines. We get a lot of distresses that establish those conditions. So we have all this information. What do we do with it? How can we now use this information? So we'll drop that. It's basically an attribute table that we export to Microsoft Excel. And the reason is because we can sort things so easy in Microsoft Excel. We can really get granular with the detail in Microsoft Excel with this sorting function. And we can start creating a lot of things in it. So I don't want to get too deep in it, but you can see that we have our collectors that are in this data set broken out. And that's important because those carry more traffic.
On the left coming from the GDOT information, looks like the GDOT information.
It probably is GDOT. There's a data set somewhere. I think GIS
I
person
use
still
that
here.
in work that I do. It gives you this information, collector, primary,
Yeah.
arterial. And then your information is taking that information and identifying for us how many miles we've got of fair, good, whatever.
Right. So each of these over here gives you those lineal feet of different conditions on each of these roads in the collector and your subsequent PCI. And so the idea is here, collectors, those are our more higher priority roads. All of them are important. All of them have meaning, but they're higher priority because they carry more traffic. So we'll put some thresholds in there that will tell us that when it falls below a 75 PCI, it's going to throw a yes out there and says, hey, this has gone below the threshold that we want. And so the data itself will start putting out some projects for you to look at. Doesn't mean you have to do them, but so when our locals are there, then we're going to probably let those regress a little bit further before we spit projects out there, just because they don't have as much traffic, so they won't regress as fast when they get to a certain condition. So we'd love to have everything at an 80 PCI and we just nothing fall below it, but that's not where we are. You have some challenges in the network, and I think Eric and those guys picked out some challenging roads because they knew that they were going to be needing to have some projects done on them. So you also get a summary of information here, and it kind of gives you, as a network, which we're not looking at a network. I think we looked at 63, 64 miles of pavement on this study, but we have a network level of 72.1 PCI. That's about middle of the road. It means that overall your conditions are in fair condition of this. So if these are the worst roads you have, I imagine the rest of your network's going to be better. And again, it breaks out the total network, the 63.8 miles that we drove, by condition. And this is a metric of success, so that if we make good decisions and we add enough service life back in, we expect that this number will go up if we do well, and it's going to go down if we don't put enough service life back into our network. Okay? So this is kind of the dashboard, as I would call it. This is that data expressed three different ways. You know, we have the video right here that is as transparent as we can be. This is an interpretation of that, just those conditions. And then we have the workbook. And all this stuff works together. And I just wanted to give you a demonstration on how that works. So, this is not your data set, by the way, but so we have High Trail Road right here. So in the workbook, you can click on it, and it will go find the road for you. And then you can click here, and it's going to give you an option to play the video. Then you can play the video, then you can drive it. So all this data, we have this Excel spreadsheet has location in it, and so we connect it to Google Earth. These are inexpensive programs. They're intended because we have them, we're used to them, we're comfortable with them, but the data is still just as vibrant and as deep. It's just that GIS kind of scares a little people when you start getting into it, but this does not. So we can use this information so you can actually detail into projects that you want to look at, get closer to. You can always go out and look at them, but from a little bit higher level, you can drive all these pavements. So what we did in our program, with the pilot program, is we took several scenarios. One is going to be the optimal approach of what we thought we needed to do. But we wanted to kind of look at the way maybe people might look at data. They say, well, I'm going to do the worst first. I mean, I'm going to take the worst roads that I have, and I need to work on those because those are the worst roads I have. And that is common in it's very common, and I see it all the time. But we take that PCI from the lowest PCI and start moving our way up, and it doesn't take long to run out of money. So I think this was our budget item down here, this $1.226 million. And so we took these worst roads, and because they're bad, we have to do a full rehab and reconstruction. So that's what we put down here. What we were able to afford, in effect, was about 5.8 lane miles of roads, and we added in 87 lane mile years of service. Now remember, I said 1,088. If we don't do any work, if Effingham County decides to take off a year, we're gonna lose that much service life off of our network. We're gonna lose every year 1,088 lane mile years of service. So the work we does matter. How much service life can we put back into our pavements? In this scenario, we put in 87, so we have a deficit, and this isn't all your budget. I understand it's just one section of money, but we would put 87 lane mile years of service and have this deficit staring at us. If we only did hot mix, if we just looked at, we're gonna do hot mix pavements, we could impact 7 miles of road for the money that we have, and it would give us 106 lane mile years of service back in, and we'd have a 982 lane mile year deficit. And this is just with the data that we had, then we decided to take a best first approach. So if we went to total preservation and didn't work on any bad roads and just did good roads, what would it look like? And so with the same money, you can see the difference. I have something that's showing up on my screen. There it goes. We would impact 58.1 miles of pavement. It cost a lot less to take care of good roads, remember. We would add 443 lane mile years of service, and you can see that's about 4 times what we would do with the hot mix. It's about 5 times what we would do with the rehab and reconstruction. And we would have a smaller deficit of 645 lane mile years of service. But what we ultimately do is we look at the data and we look at your priorities and we blend all this together to say, you know, we need to look at our collectors first always. Those are the ones that carry the traffic, and if we have roads that have fallen below a certain level of distress in condition, then we need to pay attention to those. And so we did. We do find some critical condition pavements as well as some that could use some preservation that have fallen below that 75 PCI threshold. And so by selecting these roads, we were able to impact 12.8 miles and add 153 lane mile years of service. We'd love to add more, but we have some heavy lifting here. I mean, we've got some cracked roads that if we can seal those cracks and overlay it, we're gonna get some good service life out of that. And we selected a Cape Seal, which is a scrub and micro, and you may not be familiar with that treatment. And do I have any time to talk about these? Okay. Because I don't know if you're familiar with what a Cape Seal is, for instance, and I think that the one thing I'm gonna say is that we don't tell you what to do. You guys, it has to be something that you approve and that this is a treatment that you think would be beneficial for you. So I'm gonna talk about a rejuvenating mass crack treatment first. And it's a mass crack treatment, meaning it's made for cracked up pavements. And I think I got a little video here that kind of walk us through. So you may have pavements that get to this level of cracking. Well, we can't go hand pour these. That would be just way too much hand pour cracking. And so we'll come through here, and I want to stop it right here. So you can see the level of cracks, and I know you may chip seal some in your county, you may not, but a chip seal, these cracks are too great. It will not bridge over the top of those cracks. It's not the right treatment. And so you can see through this process, we push asphalt down and we seal every crack in this pavement. Very quickly, we're not trying to bridge over and keep water out. We're actually, and here's another angle of it. And this is just one such treatment because this is what I think for the pavements that we selected out, this is the proper treatment based off the level of distress that we see. And so this is, and I bring this up, and I probably should back up a little bit. I want you to see that there is a chip spreader back here, so there will be mineral aggregate that goes on top. This will be an inner layer on both of the projects, basically. So this is one treatment. On one of the roads, we would put a hot mix overlay on top of this. We're going to seal the cracks so that if those cracks do reflect through, water's still not going to get in their underlying pavement. All right, let me see if I can move this forward. And then this would be on the Cape. So we know what hot mix is. I don't need to show a picture of hot mix and what it looks like going on top of it. So we seal the cracks on the one project and we put hot mix on top. And this is what we call a microsurface. And so what happens is we've now sealed the cracks with the rejuvenating mass crack treatment. And those pavements are brittle, and the reason we call it rejuvenate, it has rejuvenator in that asphalt that goes on there. And this is the wearing course we would put down. And on a collector route, I would recommend you use the high polymer type microsurfacing just because of the type of traffic that you have. And so what these equipment has, this holds some water. And maybe we can look at this, and it has a water tank, an emulsion tank, and a rock. So this is a continuous unit, and this truck will get out of the way, and the other one will back up, and they'll start unloading here. And if I had a way of speeding this video up, I'd make it go faster, of course. But you can see that they're feeding this unit with rock, with water, and on the other side, what the valve he's messing with there is the asphalt. That's why that hose is nasty and this one's clean. But, and then up here, they have, at the top, they have some Portland cement that helps control the brake. So when they go through this, they'll take about 30 minutes that will have to keep traffic off this surface. But when you're through, it's really going to look good. It's going to look just like a brand new hot mix pavement, but it's the right treatment because we're addressing the cracks, we're taking care of those, and then we're putting a durable wearing course on it. And it'll probably run you about half the cost of what it would cost you to overlay this road. Now, we can only do this if the road does not have a lot of structural problems. And so when we looked at those that had fallen below the threshold, and it's a collector route, we thought this would be a really, really good treatment. Matter of fact, the lane that's over to the right here, that's the final wearing course and what it looks like. But now we've, so it's called a Cape Seal, and I always have a bad joke, and I say it's because it's super, man, you know, the Cape, but anyway, probably not a good joke. And finally, I just want to say, the way we use data, we love data-driven decisions. They're defendable. They really help us see things that maybe we wouldn't see otherwise in our subjective lives. But so remember we looked at that top of that regression curve. We want to plan for the life of our pavement. Use data and plan for it from the time that it's built, that we have a plan for it. We also want to focus on these impactful delay penalties. You know, we looked at those critical condition roads that are about to fall off the cliff. If we can find those and do something now, it's going to save us significant money. We don't have to do reconstruction and those types of things. And so we do find those and make sure that we're taking care of those. We talked about the threshold projects that the data is going to talk about. And then we really want to know what you do on every day, because your guys that are out there working every day, digging stuff out and fixing it, they too add service life back into your network. And so by tracking all that, we can actually answer the question, am I going to be successful? Am I doing enough? I've heard my whole life, if you do the right treatment on the right road at the right time, you'll be successful. It's not true. You have to do enough of it. And so we want to have that metric in place to say, you don't have to do it every year. Pavements don't switch real fast, right? But you do need to pay attention to how much service life you're putting back in, and that is the metric of success. If we want to get better, we need to put more service life in. If we don't ever want to get worse, but if we put less, then we'll see that our network will deteriorate a little bit. Sorry if I ran over time.
So, a couple questions, I'm sure the board has too, but we're looking at a software here, Eric, I guess, to we got an intern coming in, right? It's gonna help us gather this information.
Speak into your microphone. When you turn your head away, I can't hardly hear you.
All right. We have an intern coming in that's gonna help us input this data. We're looking for software instead of creating the wheel that will tie the GDOT information to the maintenance information to recommendation information, some kind of, so this is strictly software. Who's doing the analysis? Is that your firm that's actually driving these roads?
Okay, so if we go back to the top, that had DataStream was one of the companies that's there. He is the company when we talk about paying first step.
Got a different contract?
No, we're all the same team. So our team consists of me, who built it, Ergon. We make some recommendations just because we're familiar with it. And we have Mike Morgan with DataStream. He has some certified patrolmen that go out and they do collect the data. They do all the heavy lifting and give it back to us so we can use it. And then we have Dr. Williams, who we're all a part of it the whole way that we go as far as the data is concerned. The program, you know, the deliverables and you'll get some books that have all the information, some wall maps, you'll get a lot of stuff like that. But when I showed that screen that had that is the deliverable. It's not any heavy lifting. I think we installed some software on your computer today that takes about 5 minutes. You can put it on as many computers as you want. Whoever wants to drive your network virtually and see the data, you can do that. Again,
do we already have access to the data you've already done?
Oh, yeah. We actually had a little issue somewhere, but we got it downloaded today.
Okay.
And so
y'all did about 68 miles of our county already is what you're saying.
63.8, so almost 64 miles, yeah. I think it what it was.
So the cost is a combination of the data collection, the software itself, and the support and the analysis. So, and you get all that as a package. I mean, the majority of the cost, or a large chunk of the cost, is probably the time involved in collecting all the data.
And then we would maintain it.
They'll help us analyze it. They'll help us with, customer service to help me maintain it over time. run analysis. I can get them on the phone and they'll work with me to do the different scenarios, the worst first, the best first, the optimizations,
Right.
those type of decisions. So your fee is the software tool
And the data
and the
collection.
service and the analytics of it.
So after a couple of years, well, I guess, how long would it take to get that done if we approved it? 90 days, 120 days, a year?
It was this summer, I forget.
Yeah.
That'll get us a countywide report.
Get us a
That'll
countywide report
Probably take a
this
month or
summer.
two, I would guess. It depends on the schedules, but it could take less than a month, but I would say give it a month or two. But
And then how often is it updated? How often are these roads revisited, and who does that? We do that through our staff?
It's recommended to do it 2 years.
Through our staff, or
And
we contracted?
We would
in?
either use their staff or we would get certified to do it ourselves. I haven't had that conversation with them because I'm just trying to get
I got
the original. But the original would be their staff. They are going to utilize our intern as part of that fee,
Okay.
or part of that summer, I'm sorry, I'm stuttering here. We're gonna use our intern to do some of this
Yeah.
work, and that's
Well,
built in
they'd be the.
quote that they gave
the
us.
person you direct to go out and do specific things or input data. But, so what's the cost in subsequent years to review this every 2 years, say?
And I'm not the one that does that end of it. That's with data stream and what they do. I don't think the cost is much different. The big lifting on the front is just the inventory. It still takes the same effort to go out and gather the data and that stuff, but I would have that conversation with Mike Morgan
So we would anticipate about $50,000 every 2 years.
every couple of years. And let me say this, and you have a big network to start with. That's a lot of miles to really assess. I don't want it to sound like it's not a lot of money or it is a lot of money. But my experience has been that that's a cost, but if you make one good decision, you'll reap that back and then some for years to come. And so
That's a good
I've
point.
never seen it be a cost if people will use the data. Because if your network gets better and you haven't spent any more money on it, except for this money, it's a net win because you've improved your network with the same amount of money. And so
I've never heard of Cape Seal. That's a good example. I mean, I don't know how long that lasts. I mean, I don't know if that's really a good
probably last
solution or
about 10
not.
years. Probably last about 10 years.
About 10 years?
Yeah.
What's the normal asphalt, what's the life of that?
We give a life of 15 if it's brand new, but you need to go back in and still address those cracks. A lot of times we don't. We just overlay something and have the cracks there, and we say, and then when it reflects through, we'll get water underlined. So sometimes we don't get the 15 years, but so we look at what we think the right cracking is a big deal. That's water in, so we want to make sure that we seal those cracks up very well.
But what we're looking at here is just analyzing our roads and picking roads. We're not talking about doing all this work.
Yeah, we don't know.
Well, it's all there.
That's additional on top of
It's
it.
just gonna give you the grade on your roads in your district, so when you have money for additional roads, you can look at the real bad ones and ones that you can extend the life on.
Yeah, data
Just
instead
giving you the data.
And then we'll decide if we're gonna do this
Point-driven.
type of repair
Right.
in the future. Currently, so right now, right now, we're determined to repair our roads based on,
Phone
Who's
calls.
screaming the loudest?
well, phone calls and EOM or whoever.
Which is the wrong way, to really.
It's hard to differentiate.
We just being
between-
honest.
Yeah, no, that's
There's
what
gonna
I'm
be
getting
some of
at.
that right on, no matter what kind of data we get. We gotta realize it's not gonna all just be on the data. It's gonna be.
I think this would help all of us out too.
What other
as far
costs
as
though are
the
involved?
roads
I
we
mean, that's
choose.
really pretty cheap for developing, to ride every road and
But
develop.
we're not a company to start with, so the data stream is the only company.
Is there a
And
separate charge for the data stream? or
no,
just-
no.
This
When we
price
talk
is
about
for
paying
everything?
First Step, you're really paying data stream for the data. I am a support for it. I helped develop it along with Dr. Williams. Ergon pays me money. I don't make any money off any of this stuff. Again, it's really white hat for me. I think rather than trying to sell asphalt to help people maintain their network, it really is rewarding to see people be successful out there. And so we've done a lot of this in Arkansas, even though we didn't get any award in Arkansas, but we have a lot of people using it, and it has its own reward. I could give you example after example of where they started and where they are today.
I mean,
And you'd
really,
really
it's
look at
pretty
that
cheap
drastic
compared to
improvement.
what you get. If that's the whole ball of wax, 57 grand, and you got 2 years worth of data to work off of. And what about updating that data as we fix roads and do stuff like that? How will that?
It's all on the table. What we would typically do, because you're gonna get your data every other year, we can update information, but you may not wanna go have it, we can update, we can update your projects, but you're gonna get data, if you get it every other year, you're gonna see that improvement every other year. Your PCI will come in differently and it'll be there.
It's not
But I
something
would,
that
I
has to
would
be
make it up with Mike. I mean, he's down this area. He could go drive your roads when you're through and replace that data maybe.
But our staff should be updating the roads we
Yeah.
repair
As
and
we
what we
pave
did.
them, we'll update them.
Yeah, so that should be coming to us, that we had 650 miles and 200 miles of this, and now we only have whatever.
Yeah, there's lots of different ways of updating the data. You can do it in the workbook, you can do it on the maps, you can do it. The main thing is that we see the projects and we see the improvement it makes. But the only reason I'm always apprehensive about saying, well, let's see, we did this one, it's excellent, so now let's put this in here and change our data, is because we're not counting the regression of everything else. We can't just take credit for all the good we do and not take credit for the little bit that the rest of the system is
So
deteriorating.
you almost need to comprehensively look at everything.
Right, and that's why we think every couple of years you do it comprehensively, you get some good information back. I would look at that life extension, because the life extension is gonna tell you if you did enough. And so you're gonna automatically kind of know, based off the work that you do and what you track, whether you've done enough to improve that network. And if you do enough, which you can, I don't know your funding, and sometimes we are short funded and we can't. But the information can help guide us that way too.
And with this software track projected lane mile life versus actual lane mile life, because it'd be good to look at, maybe not for us, but future boards. We did this process, we projected 10-year lane life improvement, but as it comes out, we only had 5-year, we're already redoing it. Well, we know we didn't make the right decision, we should have just resurfaced it, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Somehow, we do budget and actual with our audits, we need something that says, this is what we're budgeting for by what we spent, this is the result we got, so we can track it 5-10 years from now. Did we make the right decisions, use the right processes? Will it do that?
I think so, because as you redo it, you're recollecting that same data, and you'll be able to compare 2 years ago to today, 2 years from now.
Yeah.
to
Years,
today.
6 years, 8 years.
If you went back to that screen where you showed what needed to be done, for example, you have a couple columns on it that's possible where you shows, all right, this is what we did, we repaired, and the year we repaired it, and we project the lane life to this time. Now, if 4 years later, we're readdressing that road because it got rated back to this other condition,
Yep.
we should say, well, that's a deficit for what we thought we were
Yeah,
getting.
we didn't get the life that we planned on, and why is that?
Something that identifies that for us, 'cause we won't know if we're succeeding in what we're doing or not if we don't have it.
Well, and that's why in cities and counties, the roads do regress differently than like a highway. Those are built under careful specs and they hold our feet to the fire and we build these things. Or an airfield, you know, those do regress differently, or those regress similarly throughout. In county roads and city streets regress differently from one end of it to another. And we saw that on Little
Depends on
McCall,
the
so to speak.
base, how big a truck's going down it, how
Exactly.
much traffic's going on
You
it.
move a new store over here and a new subdivision goes in and
Well,
you
I
have
think
those same issues. So we like
I like
we
it
can
overall,
predict,
yeah.
but we like the actual. And so we want the historical data, as you're talking about, we want this data to be historical so that at any time you can go back and look in 2022. When it gets to be 2047 and it's 25 years later, you still have 2022 data. So you have a wealth of historical information because somebody's going to sit in our seats one day and have to make these decisions and we'll have a wealth of information for them. So we
Any
did
other
want it to be
questions or
historical.
discussion around the board?
How do you get more human aspect into it, like as we're growing, as we've got pressure points on these connector roads, as, you know, seeing the need and humanly seeing the need are two different things. You know, you might have a connector road that is whatever level that needs to be replaced or handled, but you've got one that's a connector road that is seeing so much traffic, it's gonna break down way before the other one will. So how do you differentiate that kind of
So
data?
it's all data. So if you know that you're expecting growth on such and such connector road, you know, what kind of growth is that? And so Dr. Williams, she's really good at that. She's a good educator on this. So we know how it's built today, but we don't think it's going to be enough to hold the loads that are upcoming. And so we start forming our plans on the structural capacity that we need on that pavement. Right now, we don't have it. So what do we have to do to prepare for what's coming? And so you have to build it up. You have to build structure. Now, if we catch it early enough, we can build structure right on top. If we don't,
Is that added fees for that consulting part of it?
it's not for Dr. Williams and me. The only added fee's ever gonna be if you say, Mike, come out and we want you to drive these roads that we just did last year and give us a report back on, because that's him actually doing work and they have to take the data and analyze it. I'm free. Ergon pays me. And so Dr. Williams, she's an educator, and all she's doing is educating, so she's free too, as far as that goes. We'll set some meetings up that way.
Some of that human factor is gonna always be there. For example, if you got a rural collector road where there's 100 cars a day and it's in the same shape as one that's in a more trafficked collector road, but we know it has thousands of cars a day, but they're both in the same condition, we may want to do a full depth reclamation resurface of this, or 2 inches of asphalt. This one may want to do that chemical you just showed, that K-cap, because it'll get them both to about the same time. You know what I'm saying? So that human aspect's probably just going to be there for a lot of these things. We just got to have the grade, and then we got to know what we know about the traffic and the type of
How
traffic.
we'll integrate our master plan into this as well. You know, that's gotta meet somewhere at some point.
This is not gonna make the decision for you. This is gonna give you the data
Data
to make the decision.
Well, and some of it will help make it, because what we talk about is policy tables. We can get in the weeds as much as you want to today, but a policy table is going to say, for my main roads, we build them a certain width, we do things, and we have this expectation of, we know the traffic we have on it. So we might, if we're going to go fix a pothole, for instance, on a main road, we're going to cut it out and fix it right. Over here, we may say, well, there's hardly any traffic on it. I may use a cold mix and just put something in it because it's going to last a while, something like. So we could have a different policy for what we do on each road. We do know that less traffic, we don't have to have as much structure, for instance. And so, but that would be in your policy table is what I'd say. So when we see these distresses on this volume road, this is the type of thing we do. When we see the same distresses on a higher volume road, well, we're not going to chip seal a high volume road, in other words. We're going to come in and we're going to make sure that we put a certain quality treatment. It's going to look a certain way and smell a certain way, and we're going to be very happy when we get through with it.
I could see it helping with accountability as well, you know.
Yeah.
Why did you pave that road instead of mine? Well, here's the data that shows this one's a bigger need. They had 3,000 more traffic count on it every day. And here's the condition of it, you know.
You guys do traffic counts? Do you have traffic counts?
We do in some places.
Oh, from the traffic study, yes.
Because that's how you separate between your collectors. Right now, for me, I just look at collectors, they're all the same. But now you can start separating that out, because all collectors aren't the same either. The traffic really, and really the easels, the amount of heavy traffic that we have on it. You start separating that data out a little bit more, and then you can really, well, if 2 roads are the same, they're both collectors, well, this one has more traffic, so that would get
Then you get arterials that have more traffic than collectors.
It's changing, so.
Well, I think we can add this to our list of, as Eric said earlier, you know, just our most visible infrastructure, and with all the master plans we're doing, I think this will help 10 years from now.
I do too.
This will help future boards with information.
Are you already in the state of Georgia? You said you working with other counties or cities in the state?
Yeah, so our award was some work we did with Camden County. I think we've got,
That's south, okay.
and I don't travel over here, so some of my compadres do the running around over here, so I can't speak for too much about it, but I think there's like Long County, Camden, McIntosh, I'm just throwing some names out. Robert Civil Engineering, who's on that side, they had a lot of people that they wanted to have some interest with. We do some other cities as well. I know Winder, Georgia has somebody that runs their stuff, but that's just I'm sure I'm going to miss some that we do.
That's
I know,
okay.
just for Eric, have you talked to any of these counties
what I
to
was gonna
see how
ask,
it's
yeah.
working out for them?
Have you done any background on these other cities to say, hey, we love the software?
No, sir, I haven't talked to them. I've used a software like this, not this particular one, but I've used this in past in another job, and so I really understand it. But I have not talked to any of the others that are using this data. Roberts Civil got us connected with First Step when we were doing the LMIG, which is your next agenda item, and so that's how we got partnered up with the First Step program is through Roberts on the work they were doing for us.
Okay.
I think the concept is great, but I'm not sure it would be wise to make a few calls to some of these other cities
I agree.
before we actually pull the trigger and say, hey,
And if
how'd
you want some
find the
references,
software?
and if you remember when I started with the data, data in itself isn't going to get you there. You got to want to use it. You got to have a passion for it. So just because we do work with people does not mean they're going to be successful. Some people use the data for other things.
Right.
And so, but I know a slew of people from my state that use it religiously, and I would ask that you maybe talk to some that I'm at least familiar with on how they've used it.
Yeah, I think it'd be great if you give us half a dozen or more
Okay.
references, and I think 2 or 3 in the state of Georgia would be good, because it's our conditions of the sun and
Yep.
what we have, and just see, how was the software? Was it friendly? Was it easy to put data, get it? Did they work?
That's not
Did the data they
complicated.
give you, was it very usable, no matter how they used it? I think it'd be wise to do that, if the board's okay with that, and then you could do that and come back to us at the next meeting. I think the concept and the idea of what I saw looks really wonderful. But I think before you pull it on 57,000, just know that others appreciated it.
You probably do well in South Carolina.
So
It's a longer drive, isn't it?
I think I hear that the board's, in the essence of time, is very favorable toward moving forward, but I think we'd like to have that confirmation from those who are using it. So I'm gonna ask for a motion to table this to the next meeting, which is, give me the date on that.
This was a discussion, was this a?
It was an action item. so-
Was it an action
Yes,
item?
sir.
Yeah, consideration to approve the creation of a pavement management program and contract with First Step. So I'm gonna ask for a motion to table this until the, May 3rd meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Deloach, second by, Mr. Floyd, to table this item to the, May 3rd meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously.
Thanks
I
for
don't-
coming.
Yeah, thank you for the trail.
Nice to
Appreciate
meet
it.
everybody.
Thank you for representing us well in the NCAA basketball tournament.
Well, I was gonna say something about, we had a national award here in Georgia, so apparently in Georgia, you can get national awards and championships and those types of things. We can only get to 8, you know, you
That's
guys
right.
can at least get the
But you
championship.
did get to the 8. That was great. All right. Number 14, consideration, see if we can push through these and we'll take a quick break, and I know we need a bathroom break, whatever. Consideration to approve ratification of the MIG 2022 road paving selection and notification of pending advertising for the invitation to bid. That's the item number 14,
Yes.
okay?
Mr. Chairman, this is a continuation of the discussion. You just saw a presentation of the data. We used this system to do that 60-something miles of road. Public Works gave me basically $12 million worth of work that they were recommending, and that was based on the way we've always done it. We always just hot mix resurface the worst of the worst based on complaints, whatever. And this, as we have already discussed ad nauseum here, that I needed a way to pare down $12 million into $1 million because that's all the LMIG money had.
And we had to
And
meet
so-
that deadline for LMIG too.
And we had to meet the deadline to submit that grant application. So Roberts jumped in and helped me out. We got hooked up with First Step. And I'm holding a spreadsheet that EOM gave me with all the roads. We did the system. We came up with a recommendation of 3 roads. This is kind of an oddball thing. We typically don't come to you to ask permission to advertise for bidding. That's usually, we just come to you with the award. But given the presentation, the methodology we used, the way we selected the 3 roads, just wanted to give you an opportunity to look at the 3 roads that came out of this pilot study and the treatments that are proposed, and Daryl's already described those to you. And then with your concurrence, we're going to put this out for bid to get the contractors. This is the LMIG 2022 money. And so the recommendation is to accept these 3 roads that are listed in the staff report, Sand Hill Road, Old Tusculum and Bay Road, and the treatments, microsurfacing on Old Tusculum and Bay, and then hot mix on Sand Hill. And you saw in the presentation how we came up with those results, and our recommendation is to approve those roads and go forward with bidding.
The microsurfacing is this treatment that we saw in the,
The Cape Seal,
Yes, sir. The Cape
that be
Seal, I'm
the
sorry.
first
Yeah,
time we've done
microsurfacing
that here?
Cape Seal, yeah.
I wouldn't
Okay.
mind seeing how that works. That'd be a good opportunity to, maybe.
Well, if approved and when awarded, I'll get the schedule and we'll have a field day.
The only issue I have is we've only looked at a small amount of our roads, and we're making $1 million decision based on tiny bit of data that's only a portion of the county.
Well, we took what EOM suggested we consider for paving, and like I said, I pared down 12 million to 1 million, and I felt like this was a better way than just grabbing in the dark.
And under normal circumstances, when we take our annual allocation, we try and divide it up. We've in this case, we already had a ton of roads being repaved in each district as a result of T-Splost, and we were anticipating FTR today, but hopefully we'll get it get it going. We decided to kind of limit it on this one, just because it was based on the data that we got.
Really,
versus
I mean,
anything else.
this is the road names y'all have already submitted to the state.
Yes,
So, I
correct,
mean,
but we're gonna put the
it's
ITB out
done.
on it.
Yeah.
We approved that a while back.
Oh, that's right.
This is just,
Okay.
this is, because they wanted a time crunch for that. This is just how they're gonna spend the
How
money.
we got there, yeah.
Oh, I see. And the method.
Yes,
used.
Yeah, and, you know, just, real quick, I know Jamie and I were looking at a while back, I don't know if you remember this, Jamie, looking at our increase in, unrestricted funds. We talked about trying to get back at our next workshop and see how we might use some of that to do additional work on our road. So this 1 million is just one drop in what we're gonna be doing between T-Splosh, using some of the excess funds that we got through some selling land, different stuff. We got a lot of opportunities, but I know you and I wanna look at some additional work we can do on our roads as well, some of that money.
Yeah.
So this is just one portion of what we're gonna try to do in our challenges. So if you have a motion to move forward with alternative one?
I'll make a motion to approve alternative one.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Floyd, second Mr. Burdette, to approve alternative one. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Item number 15, consideration to approve change order number 2 for Marsh Construction to construct the building and finish the Hodgeville Fire Station number 15. This is the one we've been discussing for a while, right, Eric?
Yes, sir.
So you make it brief as you want to. I think we understand the issue.
We have approached Marsh, who is our prime contractor for the site work, with the default of construction, Savannah Construction Restoration. We needed to find someone to finish the building. Marsh was willing to give us a bid, $704,818. This puts them as the prime for the entire site and gets the project complete. We compared this, by the way, to the recent bids on Guyton.
It's
They came
lower.
within 50,000.
Yeah.
So this is the additional money to finish out in addition to what we're paying them for the site work.
Yeah, so we did all right on the way you had to approach it. That's good.
Yeah.
Any questions, discussion? Motion for alternative one?
Make a motion to approve alternative one.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Burdette, second by Mr. Deloach for alternative one. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Item number 16, consideration to approve, accept the county building space allocation and assessment study facility master plan. Is this gonna be a long presentation?
No, sir, I'm gonna make it very quick. I'm gonna first say you're welcome for the very big, thick ream of paper that's in your packet. We put the entire facility management report in the packet. We've completed the work. The 2 deliverables was a condition assessment of our buildings that we selected, and the other deliverable was a space allocation study where we interviewed every department and we kind of paired up their needs with physical space. And so now we have a master plan, quote-unquote master plan for facilities that tells us what repairs are needed at our buildings, what upgrades and remodeling is needed to accommodate the users, and it gives us price tags and it gives us priorities. And so we'll be using this going forward with projects like SPLOST and other annual budgeting for repairs and maintenance of our facilities.
The only question I have, I just wanted to make sure, so we're kind of approving, I guess, the plan on the facilities, but as y'all do each building, y'all would come back and present a budget, and so this isn't saying, hey, here's 200 million or whatever, and
Yeah.
roll it. I mean, each project, y'all would still come back and
This
we
is
talk
just
about it.
adopting the plan?
Okay.
Yes, sir, and
All
the
right.
way I wrote the alternative, you're accepting the study as a
Okay.
document that we will be using to make decisions
To
in the
work
future.
from,
Hey,
we,
before,
we could
before
re-
y'all do any of those things, it'll have to be approved by the commissioners, right?
That's right.
Yes, sir, that's what Mr.
Correct.
Deloach was asking. Yes,
Correct.
every project will come back to you for award of a
and we could
design fee or a
reprioritize. We
construction
don't have to
fee or
follow
whatever.
it if we have a legitimate reason why we think this priority is over that priority.
That's
But
right.
it gives them a structure from which they can move forward in making plans to bring to us.
Right, it's kind of like the
Yeah, but it needs to be okayed by us.
It will.
Yeah.
Before
Yeah, it'll
anything's
come back.
done.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it'll come back to us. Even
Yeah, it's like the
priority.
transportation master plan. They're just a series of recommendations, but ultimately, to move forward on any project, we have to come back to you and for approval.
I just didn't look over everything, so I figured that they would come back to us over.
An
over
example would be like the road thing we just said, we get the data, we get the study, and they would recommend, based on that, these 15 roads, we may say, no, pull these 3 out, put these 2 in, and we'll approve this budget amount,
That's right.
you know?
It is a planning document for us to use,
But it gives you
tell you what kind
a
of money we
starting
need to
point.
budget
And it can be a
for.
living document where it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
been changed as needs change.
Good reading material if you're having insomnia, just print it out, take it
I
home.
just didn't want to be riding down the road and see a new project going on. I said, wonder what that building
That's
is.
right. Yeah.
The county,
You voted
our
for
staff
it.
has done building the building. So that's why I want to make sure it's got to come before us before they build anything.
You're exactly right, and I think we're good with that one. Okay, a motion for alternative one.
Make a motion to approve alternative one.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Deloach, second by Mr. Kiefer for alternative one. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, no. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Item number 17, a letter of support, consideration to approve an indication of roundabout support letter related to Georgia Department of Transportation, GDOT, for a project to construct a single-lane roundabout at the intersection of 17 and Wesley Drive, Marlow Road. Is that Sand Hill Road, where Sand Hill hit 17?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
That's where those kids got killed a few years ago. We,
It tells
Went
you
under
something.
that, went under that truck?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Was that also where the tanker,
yeah,
That's what you're talking about, tanker, yeah.
oh, is that the same one?
All right, so that's a state project. We just want to put a letter of approval for that.
It is, the only obligation from us is lighting, which is traditional on the roundabouts.
Anything they can fund on roundabouts, I think that we can put minimal into is a great idea.
is there a timeline on this? What's the time frame for this one?
I do not know what their timeline is on this. They're in what they call their intersection control evaluation, ICE step. And this is their process where they go through and they decide roundabout versus traffic signal, et cetera. They're looking for support from the county for this chosen option, commitment to pay for the lighting, commitment to, if we choose to landscape it, we have to maintain it. That's the other part of it. And they're looking for a letter of support from the chairman so that they can move this thing forward to a design phase.
Which is alternative one. Do you have a motion for alternative one?
Make a motion for alternative one.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Floyd, second by Mr. Loper for alternative one. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no.
A lot of people be happy about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Hearing none, it passes unanimously. Item number 18 is removed, and so do we need a break to use the restroom before we do the reports, probably? Or are you good?
I could use a break just to take a quick one.
All right. Do we have staff administrative reports tonight that we need to give?
I don't have an administrative report if you don't
We
need
can come back at the end of
it.
our time and do our commissioner stuff. Any staff reports from anybody? All right, if we can wait on that, then let's go ahead and take a break, and after that, we'll come back for general session. If we need executive session, do we have a need for executive session tonight?
Probably so.
Okay, so let's take a quick break. We'll come back and have a, well, we can go into executive session now if there's no other business. We'll make a motion to go into executive session, take a break, and we'll meet for executive session.
Okay, if we can go to restroom before.
Restroom first, yeah. Motion for executive session, Mr. Kiefer?
Make a motion to go in executive session to discuss personnel, property, and pending litigation.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Kiefer, second by Mr. Deloach to go in executive session. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Hearing none, we will be in executive session. So our staff, we're done if you want to retire for the evening, unless you're needed for executive session.
That's right, I need you to stick around.
Those stomachs growls.
Trying to make it hard on us.
Arkansas did okay in the SEC and in the NCAA.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
What we got?
Yes, sir. Nice to meet you. Sounds good. Maybe we'll